Following the lectionary, what we have now is the beginning of the closing of the pre-slavery time of the Israelite people. So as a reminder, as a backup, what we have is that Joseph was sold into slavery because his brothers decided not to kill him. They were very nice in that respect, so they sold him into slavery, all because he looked like Donny Osmond and had an amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. But really it was because he was his dad's favorite, and that's why he got the pretty coat to begin with. They were incredibly jealous of him. And so he gets sold into slavery. What happens next is a series of ups and downs because he's able to tell dreams and understand what these dreams mean. So while he's there, he's a slave to the house of Potiphar, and Mrs. Potiphar's wife, because she's not named, so I don't know what else we're supposed to call her, she essentially tries to seduce poor Joseph. He says no, she gets thrown in jail because that's exactly how these things are supposed to happen. While he's in jail, he sees someone who has a dream. He reads it for him. That guy gets out, goes to Pharaoh, who's troubled because of these dreams about these really weird cows. He says, hold on, I know a guy. I can help you out here, but you have to get this guy out of prison. And so that's what he does. So he gets Joseph out of prison. Pharaoh tells him the dream. Joseph explains the dream. And it's all wonderful and happy, because now Joseph has this power and he's able to help people during this famine. He becomes this sort of governor of sorts. And his family moves on, and there is this new youngest son named Benjamin. And then they come to Egypt because they're hit by the famine too, and they're only 2 years into it, and they still have 5 more years. So they go to Egypt and say, we need food, and we understand that you guys, for some reason, stockpiled food, so can you help us out? When they get there, they run into Joseph because, again, Joseph is the one who's in charge of all of this food. And they don't recognize Joseph. They know he's some Egyptian guy that is going to help him. And I think that what happens here is interesting because most of the time, we kind of skip to the happy ending, the reuniting, the hugging, the kissing. Oh, this is your new baby brother. His name's Benjamin. And he's all happy to see him. And the brothers are happy. And there's this reconciliation. And there's this hugging and kissing. And it's the Hallmark movie. They skip over what it takes to get to that point, though. You see, Joseph decides he wants to play a trick on his brothers. So what he does is he has this silver goblet placed in Benjamin's bag. And he calls him a thief. And the punishment for theft from a high-ranking Egyptian official would be death. And so he forces them all to stay in Egypt, to terrorize them, to scare them. And then after that, he reveals himself. And it's weird. It's such a weird story, and it's almost glossed over at some point. Because the point of this story that we're told over and over again is, it's about forgiveness. Joseph forgives his brothers, and his brothers love Joseph. Well, yeah, of course that happens because Joseph's now in a position of power, in a position of authority. But it's interesting to me that what he chooses to do with that is actually abuse his power and abuse his authority. And he does it because, in his heart of hearts, he wants to trick his brothers. He wants to make them squirm. He wants to make them understand what fear and terror is all about. And I can't help but wonder to myself, if this whole story, if the point of this story is about forgiveness, and if Joseph is such a great, upstanding guy, then why didn't he just cut to the chase? Because again, famine, it's going to keep going on. His dad's probably really hungry. He could have just said, guys, it's me, it's Joseph. I forgive you because what you planned for evil, God used for good. All of that could have happened without the deceit, without the trickery. But no, Joseph decides that he wants to flex his might and scare his brothers, and that bothers me. Because again, if we're supposed to get to the forgiveness, if we're supposed to get to that cathartic release of emotion where Donny Osmond comes back out and he sings a touching song and then there's hugging and kissing, if we're supposed to get to the hallmark moment, why do we have to go through that deceitful part? And I think the reason is because Joseph, for all of his greatness, for all of his intellect, for all of the good that Joseph did, is still a human. And that's one of the best things about the Bible. Heroes in general are interesting not because of the powers that they have, not because of the good things that they do, but because of the ways that they're flawed. Because if a hero in a story is flawed, it means that we can relate to them more, because we already know that we as people are flawed human beings. He was so hurt by the betrayal of his family, and now they have the gumption, the wherewithal, the pride to come to him for help. They assume that there is no piper to pay, and they can just move on with their lives with how they treated Joseph. That it's like, oh, nothing about this is going to come back to us and bite us in the butt in the future. Everything's fine in Jim Dandy because even though we didn't kill him, he's just a slave, and I'm assuming that slaves have a hard life, so he might be dead, he might be alive, who knows? They just assume that the problem is gone and that they don't have to deal with it anymore. And yet Joseph, because of what's in his heart, because of his human nature, for all of his talents, he succumbs to the human notion of wanting to get revenge. He hatches this plot literally just to mess with his brothers. Because again, if the whole point of the story is about forgiveness, he should have just done that in the beginning. But Joseph is a flawed human being, just like us. And this plot works. It works so incredibly well that in the text we're reminded that his brothers were too scared of Joseph to even mention to him that his father was still alive. Like he asked, guys, is Dad okay? Is he still alive? And his brothers are just standing there like shocked at everything that's going on, because they also know that if this is Joseph, which they're pretty sure it is, they're pretty convinced that it is at this point, if this is Joseph, he has power over them, and he can destroy them at a moment's notice. And this gets glossed over again with Donny Osmond's voice and Broadway production values and Technicolor Dreamcoats, but we miss this part of the text. Because our human nature is not wanting to deal with our human nature. We just want to get to the good points. We just want to see how it is that we can be better. But the way to get better is by noticing the flaws that we have. I think that's, to me, that's what's so powerful about Calvin's thoughts on total depravity. That there is that we're sinners, and not just that we're sinners, but that everything that we do is, in some way, is marred by sin. And that when you actually know who you are in the hierarchy of things, it makes God's love, God's grace, and God's forgiveness that much better. You see, in my estimation, it's very easy to succumb to human nature. It's easy, for example, in this case with Joseph, it's easy to go out for revenge because as sinful humans, what we do is we conflate revenge with justice. That's why characters like the Punisher are so popular with people. They dispense revenge as opposed to someone like Captain America who's all about justice. And our human hearts, what we do is we get things twisted. It's so insidious sometimes, the ways that we conflate things. That, we say, this is for justice, but no, it's just about revenge because things didn't go your way. And you're upset. The reality of the world, the reality of human nature in and of itself is that sometimes we can't trust ourselves to do the right thing. We just can't, because again, if we're all these totally depraved sinners. And I don't say that in order to make people feel bad. Like my mother, God love her, she always used to say that when I got on my soapbox about total depravity and sin, she's like, oh, don't send people to hell in the sermon this Sunday, Sam. I was like, I'm not sending anybody to hell, number one, because that's not my job, and I totally don't want that responsibility. But it was always about this idea of if we know where our faults are, if we know where our flaws are, then we're actually able to overcome them. And the biggest flaw that we all have to grapple with, is the same flaw that Joseph has. This human nature. It kills me. It destroys my mind. Like, why didn't he just from the onset say, guys, it's me? Why did he have to mess with them? And I suppose that gives me a bit of hope. Because Joseph is regarded as one of the heroes of the Bible. Again, he's got a whole Broadway production named after him. You get Donny Osmond, the guy who wrote and sang Muskrat Love, one of the best love songs of all time. But it makes me understand that even though I'm a flawed human, I understand that we're called to be different. We're not supposed to go about our lives as business as usual. Instead, we are called to walk a harder path. The path of the righteous man is beset on all sides by the iniquities of the selfish and the tyranny of evil men. Blessed is he who, in the name of charity and goodwill, shepherds the weak through the valley of darkness, for he is truly his brother's keeper and the finder of lost children. And I will strike down upon thee with great vengeance and furious anger those who attempt to poison and destroy my brothers. And you will know that my name is the Lord when I lay my vengeance upon thee. That's not actually in the Bible. It's actually a long-winded and altered form of Ezekiel 25:17, which essentially boils down to, and they will know I am the Lord when I lay my vengeance upon them. This long-winded part, this version of it, which is awesome in my estimation, we'll get to why it's awesome, but it actually comes from a movie about hitmen, about hired professional killers. And at the end of the film, which is kind of partway through the middle because it's really weird how it's set up, but towards the end of the film, one of the hitmen has this revelation. See, they were going to go retrieve something for their boss, Marcellus Wallace, and what happened was there was a hiccup in the plan. Someone comes out of the bathroom, empties a clip of a gun at them, and they don't die. And so what proceeds after that is they start talking, was this an according to hope miracle? Because the one man is convinced that it's an absolute miracle, that they didn't die. And the other guy says it's just some random thing that happened. So at the end of the movie, which is technically in the middle somewhere, but it's at the end because it's this really nice cathartic moment, the two hitmen enter into a restaurant and they're having breakfast. And the one who believes it's this miracle, who's played by Samuel L. Jackson, by the way, he says, I'm out. I want to leave this life behind me. One of the main characters decides that he doesn't want to be a hitman anymore, and he decides that he is just going to walk the earth helping people because he felt the presence of God in that. But in order to get there, what happens is there's these two other characters that show up, and they're robbing the place. So they have their guns, and they're trying to get all the money from people, but he's still a hitman. Okay, so what he does is he tricks one of them, he tricks the guy, and he holds them at gunpoint, and they have this discussion. And he explains the verse, and he says, when I said this to people, it was the last thing that people would hear. He explains that he never thought much about it, but he just thought it was a cool thing to say before he killed people. Yet he also took it that he was the righteous man. and that the people that he killed, those were the evil men, and that his gun was the shepherd protecting him. But now, after going through this moment, after seeing the power that God actually has in the world, in his life, after witnessing a miracle, he says, I get it now. And he looks at the robber who is doing something wrong, by the way. He's robbing people at gunpoint. And he says, you're the weak, and I am the tyranny of evil men. But he doesn't want to do that anymore because he understands that there's this other way to live his life. And so he says, I'm trying, Ringo. I'm trying real hard to be the shepherd. And so he goes against his very nature, and his nature was to kill the two people and to save the day that way. But no, he changes so dramatically that he doesn't kill them, that he gives away all of the money in his wallet and tells them, that's enough, get out of here. And this ending encapsulates his change in perspective, because now he knows who he is and what he does, and he decides that he has to do something different, that he wants to go against his nature. He decides to walk the hard path of not only justice, but mercy. And this brings us in a really weird, strange, roundabout way to our reading today. Again, on the surface, one can preach about how the squeaky wheel gets the grease, because this woman comes to Jesus and says, Jesus, I need your help. Can you please help me? The disciples try to shoo her. She keeps going, and she has this back and forth dialogue with Jesus. And so it's easy to say, persistence. Push, pray until something happens. That's the acronym we all know about prayer. One could talk about how the blessings of God are for all, including the foreigners, because again, she's a Canaanite woman. And he says, I'm not here for the Canaanite people, I'm here for the lost house of Israel. But in doing that, Jesus says some pretty shocking things to the woman. When she continues her pleas for help, even despite what he has said, that I'm here for the house of Israel, Jesus instead calls her a dog. And he doesn't just call her a dog, he calls all of her people dogs. He says, I'm here for the house of Israel. He says, it is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs. He says, we're not going to waste the good stuff on the dogs. You're the dog, is what he's saying. Not just you, but your whole people, the Canaanite people. The good stuff, the salvation, the forgiveness, that's for the house of Israel. They're the children of God, but you people, no, you're the dogs. It's mind-boggling to me, because we always have this picture of Jesus as being this kind of nice, polite, quiet guy who wasn't too political or anything like that, because he didn't want to ruffle feathers, when really, when we look at Jesus and we see the things Jesus says, when we have this time in prayer and study of Jesus' word, we find a lot of shocking things. That Jesus upset the fruit basket more often than he put it back together. This notion of Jesus calling this woman, the Canaanite people, dogs, it should disturb us. It should unsettle us, because it seems so weird and out of character for Jesus, the guy who says, love everybody, just called people dogs. They already have been discounted by the disciples, because again, the disciples, they're doing what they're supposed to. Shut up, woman, go away. You're just some woman, you're just some foreigner, get out of here. They have already discounted her, and Jesus is echoing these, quite frankly, racist sentiments for a specific reason. He's basically echoing what the disciples are thinking about in their minds. Oh, but they don't say that. Oh no, they don't want to say that, because they believe in their heart of hearts that all people are important, except when the rubber hits the road, right? So this woman counters by saying, yes, I get it. I get it. I'm a dog. I'm the lowest of the low. I totally understand that. You are up here, O great, mighty, powerful, actual human, and myself in my foreigner status and my woman status, I'm down here and I am a dog, and I absolutely understand that because she knows who she is. She knows where she comes from. She knows she doesn't worship the right way. She knows she doesn't look the right way or believe the right way or do anything that she should be accepted by anyone from the house of Israel. But she looks at Jesus and she says, yeah, I'm a dog. But even the dogs get the scraps from the kids. And this is entirely true. I figured out part of the reason why Nemo and Barker are such good friends is because if he doesn't want to eat something, he just yeets it onto the floor. And that's why the dog's always with him, because he knows, oh, the little one, if he doesn't like something, I can eat it. And actually, all of my kids do it, but they think they're slick that I don't know. Even the dogs get the crumbs, get the scraps, get the leftovers. She's just asking. She's not asking for a full-course meal. She's asking for the garbage. She's asking for the leftovers. Because she knows how low she is. But then at this point, Jesus appears to do a full 180 turn and applauds her for her faith. And he heals the woman's daughter of the demon that was tormenting her. And I think the rationale for all of this was because he had to teach the disciples a lesson. You see, it wasn't just that Jesus thought that this woman was a dog. Again, because those words, they don't match up with what Jesus was saying. Instead, Jesus says, the kingdom of heaven is here now, period. That salvation, that gift, that the love of God is for the people of the earth. This was what Jesus was saying. This is what Jesus was preaching. But the disciples, see, they're still human. They're giving in to their human nature, and they're not saying it. Because oftentimes people don't have to say it, but they can harbor these thoughts inside of them. And they know, they're like, I'm an Israelite. I got a book here that says God chose me, that this is my land, that I'm able to do pretty much whatever I want, and that God loves me because God chose me. And so Jesus echoes these unsaid things. He doesn't do a 180 turn. He knows that the woman has the faith that she's supposed to have, that the disciples are supposed to have. But because the disciples did the human thing and counted her out, Jesus had to explain to them what it was actually like to do the right thing, to do the hard thing, and to live as Christ wants them to live. So that's the challenge for us today. And see, there's really a choice that we all have to make, okay? So we can be worldly. All right, we can go about our day not upsetting the status quo. We can choose to be like Joseph. We can act on our emotions, our feelings, everything that makes us who we are as a human. We can do the wrong thing for what we think is the right reason. We can do all of these things. We can discount people. We can hurt people. We can harm people. We can do all of these things. Because again, we're people, and that's what we do. Or we can walk the hard path. We can try to be the shepherd, protecting people from the iniquities of the weak and the tyranny of evil men. It is a choice. It is a choice we have to make today. Truth be told, it's always been our choice how we act. And I hope, against hope, more than anything I've ever hoped for in my entire life. I hope that you all will choose wisely. Amen.